Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for May 21st, 2018. We'll begin with the special order calendar to continued hearing items. Item number 1, 55137BZ, 23302 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
All right, this was kind of a messy site. They provided us some photos showing some freestanding temporary fencing that was installed around the Reds building site. There's no explanation for what that's really supposed to accomplish, given that you can just move the fences with your body. I mean, I don't know what that's for. So the instruction at the last hearing was the improvements to the site have to be done now because the site's really an eyesore. We asked also to understand how many cars are needed for each function, so as to understand how that would keep cars off the sidewalks. We didn't get any information on that. The number of spaces on the site was reduced from 30 to 20 on the plans. We had asked for a maneuverability diagram to show how this site operates with the separate uses. We didn't get that either. So there's one, they use car sales, and the other is the service establishment. So we still don't really understand how this site's going to be used. The statement of facts was revised, but still shows an extension of term when the term doesn't expire until 2022. That was specifically, we talked about how the statement of facts is asking for more than is needed, it seems. DEC submitted a closed spill letter, and a letter from an environmental consultant indicates that groundwater monitoring wells have been abandoned. I didn't really like the word abandoned because DEC requires that the wells be properly closed. So what do they mean by abandoned? Walk away, or properly closed and no longer used? So we need more information on that. Any other comments on this one?
My concern was with the maneuverability and barring the number of vehicles that would be needed for each one of the services that's going to be provided on the site. At least from the plan that's been provided, there is adequate maneuverability area that is being provided to the east of the structure that would allow for all the turning movements to happen there without, and the vehicles can then enter into the mainstream rather than backing out. And they're also, in the plan, they have, the plan shows that the easternmost curb cut is being eliminated, which is good, because then you do kind of limit maneuverability areas to just existing curb cuts.
So with respect to that open area, you're saying leave it as an open area, don't park in it. I think that's what they were doing. Obviously, they're filling the site up with it on every imaginable spot with a car.
Right.
Okay.
And by removing the curb cut, the easternmost curb cut, it also further eliminates the possibility of these two sites, the abutting two sites, being used in tandem. Mm-hmm. So that was another concern.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other?
Yeah, and in the photos, I noticed that like too many parts of the pavements are not in good shape. I believe they need either replacement or resurfacing.
Yeah.
However, I felt like they are arguing that they cannot do this now because of cost, because of the high cost associated with the replacement. They submitted a price quote from one of the contractors indicating that in order for them to replace these, it's going to cost them over $100,000. But I believe the quote was for 6-inch concrete pavement, and I didn't see that the entire pavement is concrete. It's mainly asphalt, so I'm not sure why they are going that route. 6-inch concrete seems to be like very costly, and it's not needed for a site like this. Mm-hmm. So I believe if they go with the existing, which is asphalt, the price would be like much less. Mm-hmm. So, and they can do the work now, like you just said. So
right. Often we see them. It's not like they remove all of the hard surface material. They screen it and they
Yep,
bring it
yep.
down to a level and then they top it off.
Yep.
So I don't know, we see that a lot.
I feel like they are assuming that they're gonna remove everything and put 6-inch thick concrete slab, which is way
But didn't
more
they-
than what they need, I
Didn't they
guess.
give an estimate that said the cost to repave both of the sites is $72,500, and that was for both this site and the
Right.
next case? So,
Right.
And
Yeah.
I do think maybe the reason they're not doing the work on this site is because they're planning to do it for the entirety of the site and pave it, which makes sense in this case.
Well, it makes sense because it's always cheaper when you get a
Right,
bulk
a
price.
big amount.
But nonetheless, we have a site that's an eyesore, and if they want to get an approval, they have to do it now because the site is really in terrible. And they've been misbehaving on the site for a long time, so. And I don't know if they want to do it in tandem with the other, why
They
not?
should be able to,
Yeah,
right?
I don't see why they couldn't just do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality of what they'd have to do probably is they do the red site, move cars that are on the other site onto the red site, then do the other side, right? Because otherwise they have to shut down operations on the exterior of their site. And then they have those two different kinds of parking areas, the same kind of thing. They would do one parking area and then move the cars onto that area, and then they could work the other. So it still has to be done in phases if they don't want to have to shut down the business for a week or whatever. Okay.
Item number 2, 33478BZ, 23320 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, so continuation on the same discussion as prior, similar issues. The temporary fencing is not a solution. And it needs to be installed permanently, and it needs to be done before we can make a decision on this case. And also, in this case, they showed a photograph that shows there's graffiti on their building, so it needs to, improvement on the site needs to include painting, removal of the graffiti. Always be careful where you take your photos from. Also, I couldn't find trash storage on the site. Did you know where it is?
It's behind the main sales building.
Is it
Sorry.
actually labeled as trash storage?
It was in the initial plan.
But on this one, otherwise, the other corrections were made on this application, as far as I could tell. Anybody else on this before we find the trash storage?
Just give me
Okay.
a second.
All right.
Ready?
No, just a second. Oh, no, that's a
Refuse.
condenser. Oh, refuse, okay. But it's not in an enclosure.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just
It
a
should be-
dumpster
it
sitting
should be
there,
in
so the trash storage should be in an enclosure. Okay.
Item number 3, 43653BZ, 14150 Union Turnpike, Queens.
All right. As requested, neighbors were notified of this hearing, and they provided us with proof of notice, but we don't have any letters from neighbors. I'm not sure whether the non-compliant signage was removed, which is what we asked them to do. The area behind the building that's shown as a planted area on the drawings, but we need actually a landscaping plan with specification of planting and their numbers. The planting, in my mind, should be a dense shrubbery that's planted at 6-foot height that will grow to a height of 8 feet and act as a dense screen. The reason for that is that, and I didn't realize it, there's a retaining wall that separates the buffer forested area, as they say, from this site. And so that's part of it, but it's also the forested area is mature trees. So it's actually not functioning as a visual barrier anymore. So this dense shrubbery would be the visual barrier that the neighbors are concerned about, or expressed at the community board hearing, are concerned about losing by reducing the depth of that buffer area. And we do have a closed fill report.
I had a comment on this, and this came up as I was reviewing the new case that we're going to hear very soon. First of all, here the request is to extending the building, which will extend into this landscape area. Though the applicant is arguing that the previous use was limited to gas station, and since this is going to be gas station but not the service area, I'm not sure if that's what they're arguing, therefore they should be allowed to extend into the landscape area, which I'm not quite convinced yet, especially we have an application, it's one of the new cases, where the applicant is proposing to convert an existing service station with exact same dimension to a convenience store. Here, the existing convenience store has the same dimension of 30 by 60 as what the one that we're going to review, and they're proposing to extend that out into the rear to make it a 40-foot wide instead of a 30-foot wide, as per the plan. And I'm not sure why that extension into the rear is needed and why it cannot be contained within the existing service area footprint. This is something I was...
I'm trying to understand what you're getting at. So they want to enlarge their business. You cannot get that, right? But the question is, should they be able to enlarge the business into the buffer area, right? So one approach to that might be, okay, you can't enlarge into the buffer area because the prior board said you need this buffer area. Why can't you enlarge north and south, or whatever direction that is, instead? Or why can't you enlarge to the front?
Right.
Enlarging to the front, I could understand why that's not good, because you've got the pumps there, you don't have clearance for cars to pass, et cetera. So you could say, well, why won't an enlargement that just makes it longer be sufficient? And I don't think we got an answer to that. We did ask about that at the last hearing.
Right.
But then the next part of the question is, from my perspective, is we never see 40-foot buffer areas. So, and this was me actually at the last hearing, I was complimenting the 1950s BSA for being so careful about the impact of gas stations on communities by requiring these large buffer areas. And we've seen that in some of their other decisions, large buffer areas between one use and another, right? But because we don't see buffer areas that are 40 feet, you might say, well, why wouldn't the reduction by 10 feet be okay, as long as we beef up the vegetation between? So, and I'm not coming up with the answer.
The original intent to buffer.
Actually, it's not 40-foot buffer. The existing buffer is in
40, that's what I
Right.
mean. So they're reducing it by 9 foot something.
But they do have a right to enlarge as per 11-412.
They're just at the edge of
Right,
that.
but they are not going beyond that, and it is their opportunity to. So I don't see why we have to question whether or not we think it's necessary to have a whatever 2,500 square foot convenience store if it's an option to them. That's their own business
And we
decision.
often see convenience stores enlarging to the maximum that they're permitted to, because it's a percentage also of the site, right? Or the extent that they physically can. It's a very large site. So, I love the idea of having such a huge buffer area between the uses, but it's the size of larger than a property lot.
Right, larger than a required rear yard.
Yeah, right. So that's why I'm sympathetic to this, and if we could really have very, very deep planting, which they could do it in two ways. They could actually also, maybe that's more expensive, but to bring up the level of the yard at the rear. I mean, it's already there, actually. The buffer area is already high.
Raised, yeah.
So build right up against that and then plant the shrubs on that raised area. So it's more likely to grow because you can see the trees do really well. So bushes, the problem was they chose the wrong kind of vegetation in a certain way to accomplish the task. They chose trees, and the trees did great. But instead they need to choose shrubs that need to be maintained at a height so that they really function the way they were supposed to. posted. Because actually, yeah, so they're showing that they cut back and then they leave that rear portion at the lower level, which is actually more work.
There's a great change from the end of the property to the rear of the property of the residential.
Right, but the retaining wall, they could leave the retaining wall in place then, and then just push the building back, or maybe,
No,
they
I
have
don't
to
think
push
they
the
can.
building
They
back
have to-
against the retaining wall. But
The
they're gonna,
building will go beyond the retaining wall.
right, but so they will need to rebuild the retaining wall no matter how they do this. So if they just rebuild the retaining wall right up against the back of the building, then they won't have that sort of pit that they were proposing. There's like a 9-foot pit that's being drawn here, and I don't know why they need that. So, okay.
But
Any other-
I'd still like to see if they've explored I understand there's on one side, there's a community facility, on the east side and on the west side, there's a mixed-use 2-story. So I'd like to see other options that they can come up with before going into the buffer area, because while they may have an option, I think that they have an option to expand. While they do have that, I think it is up to, you'd have to consider that there is a prior order from the PSA retaining that 40-foot.
Right. Well, we did ask them to show us lengthening it as opposed to widening it, and they didn't do that.
Okay.
Right? And there may be good reasons why that lengthening it doesn't get them where they need to go without like rebuilding the entire interior, which isn't necessarily the goal, right?
Also, in terms of the section that is shown here, the proposed section, the proposed section shows the roof line to be a flat roof line, at least the way the cross-section has been taken, whereas, which doesn't correspond with the elevation. So,
No, I think it's because he took the sections right down the center
No.
of the roof, no?
well, even if it did, it would be sloping down
No,
because
no,
it's...
it wouldn't. If he takes it right down the center where he cuts through the center point, yeah, so what you're seeing there is the
Oh, as
rafters,
rafter.
lower rafters, as the roof
But the
slopes
roof
down.
line,
Yeah, so the top line is the peak of the roof,
right,
and then it's coming down like this, and you're looking at the rafters at a lower level.
I see.
That come across, because
Okay.
it's framing the
I see.
triangle of the
Okay.
roof. And we had talked about it at the last hearing, where it was like, be careful, because this cannot be floor area,
right,
right? Otherwise, you exceed your 2,500 square feet.
okay.
Okay,
But I understand that's going to be the mechanical area.
yeah. Right, it won't be floor area where the mechanical is, but it's the rest of the roof that I was concerned would become floor area. Okay.
Item number 4, 7-57BZ, 2317 Ralph Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this one, they received the spill closure report, and as a result, right? And as a result, we're going to adjourn this because now they can go ahead with the planting, right? Because that was the question, is whether they could disturb the soil and so on. So, yeah.
Item number 5, 39359BZ, 1945 Bartow Avenue, the Bronx.
They provided Google Earth images showing continuity of use. They removed the XX signs, and we do have a DEC spill closure letter. So I think we're good. Everybody all right with this?
There's something about the cars being parked on the sidewalk from the last hearing.
Yeah. Photos show vehicles parked on the sidewalk, signage may be in excess. They did provide a light spread diagram.
Only from the drawings that has been, the photos that's been provided, there is an ice box, and that just needs to be incorporated in the drawings.
I hope they can do that right now.
Should be easy.
Yeah, okay. So incorporate the ice box. Ice box. Drawings. And then we'll have the condition about no parking on the sidewalk, which, by the way, is illegal. And what did we learn recently? That Consumer Affairs is going to handle sidewalk
As soon as
parking?
Brennan's, I guess with this bill, it'll be Consumer Affairs can actually revoke their license after they have two violations from, where, two violations of parking on the sidewalk, these car
That-
businesses.
That's a bill that's been introduced in council, right? So we don't know where that's going, but okay.
Item number 6, 63484BZ, 251O and 259O K Avenue K, Brooklyn.
Okay, we got at the very last minute, like photo finish, the LPC archaeology sign off, and the EAS was revised to include a Jamaica Bay watershed form, and the application was, and all the materials were revised to reflect a .5 FAR allowable, so I don't think there was anything else.
7, 13887BZ, 21836 Hillside Avenue, Queens.
They requested an adjournment.
Item number 8, 60-90BZ, 525 Forest Avenue, Staten Island. We administratively adjourned this.
Right, I don't know what's going on with this application, so nothing was submitted. We actually never had an actual hearing on this application, which was submitted initially in June of 2016, where there was a dismissal warning letter sent in September of 2017, and the case was actually dismissed by letter in October of 2017, but the applicant called and said the letter had been sent to an email address that he never looks at or something like that, and begged for reopening. And so we accepted it, and we calendared it, and then the first hearing was postponed in February, and the second hearing, the applicant actually didn't appear. He sent someone in his stead who didn't know anything really about the application and said that she was here to take notes. So basically, it's been an unprosecuted application since the beginning, and I don't see why we should keep entertaining this. So my recommendation is we dismiss for failure to prosecute. Anybody else? Any other comments? No?
Item number 9, 15900BZ, 383 3rd Avenue, Brooklyn.
They requested an adjournment.
Item number 10, 6513BZ, 123 Franklin Avenue, Brooklyn.
We're just waiting for revised plans. I didn't see them as of, did they come? Okay. When? This morning?
They weren't added to the folder.
Yeah, they weren't in.
They're not in our folder.
They're not in your folders?
No.
No.
All right, we will take a quick look. Hopefully, they responded to all of our comments. It was just to revise the cellar and first floor plan to match the DOB-approved set.
Right.
And take out the private stair, so that's now an amenity to this space, and to void the amended plans. Okay, so that you, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I'll send an email to need inside. New cases, item number 11, 54556BZ, 2001 Williamsbridge Road, the Bronx.
Okay, we have proof of service of the initial application to officials, but I didn't actually find the notice of hearing, so hopefully that's in there. Community Board waived their review. The 2015 reinstatement of the application conditioned approval on installation of landscaping that hasn't yet been installed. It and the trash enclosure must be installed before we can move forward on any kind of decision. But I didn't have any other comments except it's not in compliance.
I had some question about the circulation, vehicular circulation that is being proposed. As the plans have been, the maneuvering plan that was submitted seems to show that if a vehicle that is planning to not only use the gas pump and then subsequently park on the site to kind of to purchase something from the convenience store, it would require them to go out onto the main road or take a turn into the side road, on the sidewalk to get into one of the parking lanes, just the way it's drawn. And I think there is enough space to make it work in a different way whereby the cars wanting to stop to pick up something from the convenience store can park without having to get into the sidewalk or get onto the sidewalk or go out and in of the property.
Well, they need to do that, so.
Right.
Most of the time, people just leave the car by the pump
And
run out, get what they want, and get back in.
I agree with you. I agree with you. It's only because it's shown in the diagram the way it is shown. My question is, should we then let that be, or should we have it revised in a way that would function without it requiring a maneuverability area on the sidewalk?
Yeah, they should definitely just take that off that shows the car going into the wheelchair space, saying that nobody could drive on a sidewalk to get from one part to the other.
And there's a way to turn, you could turn the car, instead of the cars being perpendicular to, what is this, Neil Avenue, it can be parallel. And there is enough space in the rear where 2 or 3 tandem parking can be provided. That's where the employees are going to be. And there's enough space for them to do the parallel parking maneuverability. So I think there's a way to accommodate all of that instead, and not in that particular layout.
Yeah.
I agree with you that most of the time they're going to be at the gas pump, run in, run out, but we should not be accepting this plan.
Right,
No, I
correct.
agree with you,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you really want cars going back behind the building, because that's where you're bumping up on the residential, that's the very next lot. Why do you want
That's the-
traffic back and forth back there?
That's the employee parking. So if we.
Yeah, but it doesn't go behind the building, does it?
You could, I mean, right now, the photographs that's been submitted, and probably the existing plan, I don't remember, did show parking in the back. So if it does, and those could be the designated employee parking, that's what the plan is showing, then there's going to be not that many coming and going of vehicles if it's employee parking. And the rest can be just the customer parking.
Tandem would discourage it from being customer parking.
Customer parking.
Because you have to know the person in front of you.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it's true. I mean, it's crazy. The maneuverability actually uses the sidewalk from A to B. Right, okay.
They need to reconcile the signage analysis form with the plans.
Item number.
Wait.
Oh, sorry, go.
Okay.
Item numbers 12, 60-82BZ, 60-11 Queens Boulevard, Queens.
My computer is thinking about it. Okay. We do have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I didn't find, again, notice of hearing.
Notice of hearing?
So we super need that, or we can't proceed, right?
Okay.
The community board recommended denial based on prior behavior of this owner-operator. The applicant needs to respond to their comments. The statement of fact states that the car wash has been discontinued, so, and there's a photo that we hope
It's not there.
represent.
I was there this
Okay.
weekend. It's not there.
Okay, good. So I just want to go through the community board's problems were entirely about getting soaked when you walk by the car wash. But one of them, which may have been related to the car wash, it's just not clear, is that they hear loud music coming from the site, but that may be because the car wash has people standing around waiting for their
Yeah,
cars.
sounds like it.
And they're hanging, sort of partying, making a party of it while they wait. They also said there's only one service lane on Queens Boulevard, which gets backed up with traffic. I think, again, that's because of the car wash aspect. Car washes always do that, where there's like all this backing up, waiting for people to finish so that you can move to the car wash. So it seems like by eliminating that, you've eliminated the community board's concerns. The landscaping plan has a light line weight and a dark line weight for shrubs. Is that indicating dead shrubs versus living shrubs? I wasn't really sure what that's about. But the photos that were provided show there are a lot of missing shrubs and trees, which must be replaced. And again, be replaced before we make a decision on this. They should provide better photos of the landscaped area from both the inside looking out and the outside looking in, all along the perimeter, and key them to the plan. Any other comments?
So, do you want to start?
I was just going to say they should label their signage analysis forms, which street is which, because I had to match them up with the plans myself.
This site, though it's in good condition, the pavement and all that, the fencing does need repair, especially the interior fencing. There are 2 layers of fencing, one along the edge of the property and one within, and the fencing within the property, some sections of it, and which is a wrought iron fence, has come undone or it's bent. Landscaping, I agree with you, it does need more sprucing and cleaning up, and there are some dead plants, those could be replaced. There were 2 closed bins located on 61st Street, those need to be removed. The trash container was not at the location as per the plan, and it needs to be enclosed.
So you want the trash container enclosed, but it's not in your location on the plans or on the site?
It's, I think as per the plan, it's on 60th Street, but based on my site visit, it was on the 61st Street. So pick a location and just have it enclosed trash, and then the trash can won't move around.
All right, so provide an enclosure.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. It's true if it knows where to live. It lives there. Yeah, okay. All right.
Move on? Appeals calendar, continued hearing items, item number 13, 2016-2A, 74 Buttonwood Road, Staten Island.
Being withdrawn.
Item number 14, 2017-103A, 3924 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
Okay, the applicant submitted what's called the driveway restrictive deck. An HOA was amended, but I'm not sure that it does enough to be clear that homeowners are responsible for all utilities in the roadbed. Instead, it says that they have to pay for their connections to the, and this was their term, to the street. But that language doesn't make clear that the street is actually Victory Boulevard, and that they have to pay for the mains that run under the private driveway. The amendments are also rather sloppy. This is more of an advice to their counsel. It isn't only owners, heirs, and assigns that have a right-of-way. It's the guests and invitees of the homeowners. There are many other unclear statements like this in the HOA, so I just would advise their counsel to take care that the language when making the amendments to a formal document are what purchasers rely on. And by the way, you're the lawyer, you could be sued if it doesn't say the right things. So I would like, instead of working on amending the HOA, which is cumbersome, is to do something more simple, which is to amend the driveway deck, which we're creating afresh, to make all the maintenance obligations for the roadway and all the under roadway/driveway utilities, the obligation of the HOA and the individual homeowners, and be clear about the scope of the obligations, including the fire department signage, refer to the approved BSA drawings, and we actually have a very good model for this, so applicants should use it. This is more of a free form that they created here. So, the model that we just did, right? Yeah, it's just that it doesn't get us there. They talk about the driveway having an access, and that's all. And they don't talk about maintenance, and the HOA isn't clear either, so, yeah. Anybody else? The decks that we create are much clearer to get accomplished. Yeah. Okay, yeah, but maybe he should just copy somebody else's. Okay.
Move on? Item number 15, 2017-218A, 35 House Street, Staten Island. We're waiting for DEP to revise the plan to 35-foot sewer corridor.
We're still waiting for DEP, I thought?
No, they changed, there was some modification to the plan.
Oh.
There was a modification to the plan, so DOT had one plan, CEP had another. So then they, to the same plan to each agency, DOT is fine, we received that. DEP just had a couple of changes, I think, and we're waiting for a sign-off from them.
Okay, so this one we talked about a lot from sort of a more of a theoretical perspective the last time. DOT signed off on the application stating that the project will leave 28 feet for North Berger for future roadway improvements. That may be true, it does that, but according to that, if North Berger were opened at this location, the house would not be set back from the street at all, but would be like plank on the edge of the sidewalk, which could only be like a 4-foot sidewalk on either side, and which would result in a 20-foot wide roadway.
Didn't they just revise
No, they just
that
revised it to
provide
35.
35 feet.
They did?
DOT
Oh.
said, yeah. there'll
That's
be
what I'm saying.
35
Changed
feet.
When did that happen?
This weekend, so,
Oh, I
yeah.
didn't see it. Oh,
That's, I forwarded to you, I didn't see it.
Oh, okay, so then,
So what DOT is saying is that this time reviewed the pertinent documents resubmitted to our office by BSA. The revised proposal provides 35-foot width of North Berger Avenue for future roadway improvements.
okay.
The improvement at North Berger Avenue at this location, which would be involved in taking a portion of Block 302, Lot 19, is not presently included in DOT CIP.
Okay. So that's,
And also, though, they were required to
What-
consult with DOT at the time when the guardrail at the end of House Street needs to be
right.
relocated.
What's the date on that letter?
May 17th.
17. So, it's just an old DOT sign. All right. Okay. Sorry, didn't see that. Good, because I was not happy with this application at all, the idea that it becomes a plug in the road if the road gets opened, and as we talked about last time, the city owns some of that road bed, and it does exist, North Berger exists to the south, so, okay.
Item number 16, 2017-254, 255A, 115, 117 Arbutus Avenue, the Staten Island.
Okay, we have an April 30th DEP sign-off, and I think that's all we were waiting for. Right?
Received DEP. Just FYI, I had sent these applications, including the new ones, to the Staten Island Borough Commissioner because we weren't getting Tika to,
Okay.
I don't know what you want to do.
But we got, for DOT you're talking about? The
Yeah,
D-
for DOT on Arbutus I don't have.
Okay.
But I think that wasn't an issue for you, the way
No,
you
I don't
closed it
think
off?
we had a problem with that. We,
Okay.
right. Yeah, I'm just looking to see if there was any comments that we needed from DOT. This isn't really a DOT domain, unlike the other one.
Okay, but we are
right?
going to condition in the resolution that they have CPC actions that they have to
Yes.
file for, and there are conditions that we put in the resolution, and that should the CPC actions create issues, that they must come back to the board.
Yes,
Okay.
and that they have to, yeah. And then we also have the HOA and restrictive decks that need to be recorded prior to C of O, and the recording info be on the C of O.
If I'm not mistaken, this is the one that the borough president didn't have a position on?
He didn't answer, we didn't get anything from him.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, I don't have any notes from the borough president.
Did we reach out, we did reach out to him on this one, though, right?
We send them
Yeah, this was
everything.
on, I don't believe, this was on the Staten Island agenda. I don't believe we had anything from him on this one when we talked about it. I did put it on the agenda for the Staten Island meeting, just to let them know. And CPC had stated they wanted the applicant to file the applications for the open area subdivision, whatever the other things are, topography.
Pool,
I think.
subdivision, and open
Subdivision,
area.
right. And so we made it clear, so I emailed DEP and DCP and let them know that we'll condition all these things in our approval. So should they go through the process with CPC that,
Kind of
there's
prompt you to
changes.
do it that way because city planning often asks for changes, but.
Yeah, I mean, unless we want to hold this case up for city planning application.
No, they should have done it the other way. More often than not, we see it done the other way.
And
Right.
I was going through my notes, and they resolved the parking issue by, it was no longer tandem parking, or,
No, the parking
No, they
is still
never-
tandem. I think our concern was the access to it and the,
Oh, okay.
Well, it's not all tandem. There's two spaces, one inside the house
Right.
at the back, the houses at the back. Oh, sorry, there are two tandem spaces at the
No.
rear. They're all tandem in those houses at the rear.
the one,
Yeah. So that's the problem, is tandem isn't
Forget it.
illegal.
it's undesirable.
In some places it is, but not here. It's just not desirable, but at least it's controlled by the owner of the house, right? These are two families, so the two tandems are the homeowners, right? So presumably you have keys to both cars hanging on a little hook on your wall. Okay.
Just check, Veronica, 6513, so they didn't make it to submit. Could you check that? Carlos says it's not submit. New cases, item number 17, 2017-282A, 148 Sprague Avenue, Staten Island?
Sprague.
It's Sprague?
I would say Sprague. It's
You say
like
tomato, I say
Parge
tomato,
versus-
I don't know.
We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommended denial, 27-1, stating, there are several problems with this application. 1, tandem parking. 2, house number 148 is responsible for maintenance of the 200-foot-long driveway, and house number 144 relies on this maintenance to access its parking. 3, new private driveway easement will be parallel to existing community. I didn't understand that. 4, a utility pole plan was not obtained. Applicant cannot prove that new utility poles will not interfere with the existing home on Petunia Court. CB3 strenuously opposes all plans that utilize an easement solely for the purpose of overdeveloping a lot. Borough President's comments, and the applicant should respond to those issues. The Borough President also on May 11th issued a letter, which the applicant should respond to. They say that the BSA shall confirm unobstructed access from the nearest map street to the property, that fire departments sign off on the applicability of the fire code with respect to the total distance from the nearest map street to the termination of the 20-foot wide driveway accessing the structure from the unmapped street, that the BSA address access to proposed detached garage structures pursuant to GCL 36, that ingress egress easements be memorialized in the BSA resolution and recorded at the county clerk, that the Borough President's Topographical Bureau requirement to post house number signage along the Sprague Avenue frontage, specifically for number 148 Sprague, be memorialized in the BSA resolution to maximize public safety and emergency response times. And finally, that the BSA address the curb-to-curb pavement of the CCO'd street fronting the property to ensure that there will be no street cuts along unmapped streets being relied upon for additional access pursuant to GCL 36. Not sure if I understood that. Okay. The DEP comment letter signed off on April 2nd. I'd like them to clarify the location of the zoning lot lines. I had a lot of trouble figuring out which was the zoning lot. They need to show compliance with the zoning regulations, especially the yards, the distance between buildings and the parking. They need to provide a homeowners association agreement and a restrictive deck for maintenance of the private drive, and obviously access easements to the private drive. And as discussed at the last hearing concerning these GCL waivers, there is a builder's pavement plan that applies to the MAP street. We want a builder's pavement plan for the private road portion that complies with all of the same DOT requirements and is drawn as such. So this is something that was recommended by or suggested by one of our applicants, and it seems like the best way to approach this. So there'll be two builders' pavement plans, one for DOT and one to establish minimum standards for these private roads. They do have city planning subdivision approval, which is the smarter way to go, frankly. Anybody else, any other comments? Okay.
Item number 18, 2017-323A, 108 Crook Avenue, Staten Island. There's a postponement for
Yeah, they didn't give
notification.
notice.
Do you want to do comments or no comments?
No, because it's postponed, and, really, comments shouldn't even be read absent proper notice, so.
Zoning calendar, item number 19, 11614BZ, 188 East 93rd Street, Manhattan.
Okay. I believe first of all, there should be a correction on the calendar. The last hearing was actually adjourned on 3/20. The only thing we spoke about was that they hadn't signed a written agreement, but that wasn't a hearing. We just said we're not going to discuss this at this hearing. So that was actually an adjournment. The two parties were supposed to have come to an agreement, and they didn't. So I do understand here that the tenant who is complaining about noise from the PCE didn't sign the agreement, although we directed the parties at the last hearing to enter into a written agreement, and we see that there was one, and we see a lot of effort on the part of the business owner, and I think the landlord, to contact this tenant. So that part I'm not understanding at all. I'm not understanding why the tenant is refusing except to try to slow down the approval on the application. The only thing that I do want to say is that Crank maintained a log for more than 2 weeks, beginning March 20th and ending May 1, so that's a lot more than 2 weeks. But I also see that the tenant sent Crank text messages, which show up on Crank's log, and they kept copies of the text messages, which was the right thing to do, where the tenant complained on March 20th, 21, 24, 29, April 1, and April 8th. So though he didn't produce a formal log over that 2-week period, which was the deal, there were complaints. So I just want to know, what did Crank do in response to knowing from the tenant that he's complaining about the noise? Because we have another note from the sound technician that says nobody touched the limiter, right? So what did they do? Did they say to the trainer, you have to stop screaming so loud? Or, I mean, that's what I want to know is, are they doing anything knowing that there were certain times where there was a complaint? But I have to say that my feeling about this is, if the tenant doesn't want to cooperate under our directions, which are repeated, then what can we say? It sounds more like he's just trying to slow down the approval process. We do see that Crank has spent an enormous amount of money. I get why this tenant might not want to, for instance, have a carpet in his apartment, but that they install, right? Maybe he'd find something, or maybe there's another way of soundproofing his floor in a way that's more acceptable, but to refuse any kind of efforts in his apartment seems, I don't know, like not trying to come to a solution.
I just want to note that in the 6 weeks of logs that they kept, the last comment from the tenant was April 8th,
Right.
and there were actually 3 weeks and 2 days without any complaints whatsoever. So
Right.
I take that to mean that the owner/applicant was very responsive in trying to make changes.
Yes.
Right.
And the log also shows that there has been a precipitous drop in the complaint. First time it was like they were back-to-back few days, and then after that it dropped. So I think I concur with Commissioner Hartley Brown. The owner, the applicant has been very responsive, and the fact that the last drop, the logs indicates there has been no complaints received. I
Right.
think every effort has been made from the applicant's end.
More than every effort, it says all efforts
Yes.
if we've, because every effort to me sounds like I did as much as I'm willing
They
to
went
do,
beyond,
and
yeah.
then what am I supposed to do about it? I can't fix it. But all efforts, maybe that's just semantics, but the whole idea is that they have done all kinds of things. And if there were only complaints at the beginning, and now we don't see complaints now, they must have done other things. Otherwise, we continue to see complaints unless it was that one trainer, if there's only one trainer, right? And the trainer's own mic was, like, maybe she's not allowed to use a mic anymore, I don't know. I wonder, can you control the sound on the mic itself? I think so. You don't need to touch the limiters. The mic has little controls, maybe they just set it at a lower level. Okay.
Move on? Item number 20, 11115BZ, 98 Third Avenue, Brooklyn. Received a revised seeker information.
Yeah.
We received that since, sorry?
For noise and air quality.
So we just received that.
And sent to DEP.
Friday.
Friday, okay, let's see if I, all right. The applicant says that they've entered into the voluntary cleanup program, so that means that OER will manage remediation of the site, and we actually have an agreement from OER dated March 16th. We will reach out to OER to confirm with them their understanding of the scope of the required remediation. We're now working directly with the OER on these kinds of voluntary cleanup situations. DEC on March 13th had approved and had an approval on the remedial action work plan that was submitted on February 28th. And OER has an approval letter from March 19th. Cost estimates for the remedial action work plan are come with a seller and without a seller. With a seller is 3.2 million, 3.3 million almost, and without a seller, 3.5 million. So I want to make sure that the cost estimates track very tightly the remediation work plan, so that we can actually see that the work plan says X and the costs are tied directly to that. Some backup data was provided to support the costs, but most of it seemed like it was a voluminous amount of backup data, and then you look at it, you see it's like cut sheets of pumps and other kinds of things like, and filters. So that's not actually, other than telling you what it is they meant by that, it's not really telling you how you supported the costs. So again, OER actually does have a schedule of anticipated costs based on unit values. So we're going to ask them to take a look at these cost estimates, and also to make sure that, the Commissioner Sheta to talk about this other part. And once we finalize the cost with OER, then we go back to the question of whether both a use waiver and a 2.5 times increase in FAR are the minimum variance, really. And then I didn't actually see DEP's responses I didn't see responses to DEP's comments about air quality and noise, but now they submitted them and we have DEP sign off?
No,
No, we just sent it.
Oh, okay, so we just send it to them, okay. Right, so they just submitted. Sorry, 1 second. And I think that was it for me. Others?
Yeah, I have no comments.
So I had originally asked for them to revise the residential rents to note which apartments actually had the outdoor space. I really just wanted an adjustment for that. I found that they readjusted all of the rents downward because they decided to reevaluate. That to me was not an acceptable response. However, if I just add back in rent money to increase the residential rents to account for the space, it does not have a noticeable impact on the return as of now. So I will continue my review when the costs are either certified or reduced or increased.
Okay, on the environmental side, I got a total remediation cost on the order of $3.3 million. The proposed cleanup includes digging down the entire site to about 18 feet. I looked at the investigation that they've done, and it's pretty much the same investigation that they previously submitted, and it was called preliminary investigation. Now it's called just investigation. And I saw that they entered in the agreement with the OER, and the OER approved the remediation plan they are coming up with, which includes, like I said, digging down the entire site to 18 foot. I did look into the EES, the phase 2 submission they made, and I took some PID readings. PID is like a small equipment that can sniff the soil samples during the environmental investigation and tells the reading for that PID, and it gives you an idea about how much contaminants in this kind of material that you're extracting. And I did notice that if the site is about 100 feet by 50 feet, if you look at the northern half of the site, the borings that are located within that half, the PID readings came up like really high, typically high, indicating that the contamination within the northern half of the site is significant, which for me makes sense because the northern half includes all the USTs, while the borings that were done in the southern half, I can say that almost these 3 of them, I did mark them as none, so that contaminants in these borings, in the samples extracted from these borings, were really low or maybe even nothing, which give me the impression that if they can remediate the northern half of the site, probably that could save them some cost. On the southern, they could probably split the cost into half if they think about partial excavation. This is one thing. The other thing, entering in agreement with the OER doesn't mean that the remediation plan that they submitted is good to go. When somebody submits to the OER look at it like this. If, let's say, you want to hold something with a chain and you need that big of a chain. If you come up with a chain that big and you want to hold the same thing, it's good because you're coming up with something that's very stronger to do a job. For the EOR, they look at it like this. If you want to dig the entire site and the necessary is just digging 30% of the site, or if you want to dig down to 18 feet and it is needed to dig down to, let's say, 6 feet, for the OER, this is beautiful, be my guest. But for us, we look at it different way. We look at it like we want to get to the minimum cleanup needed. If the minimum cleanup needed is digging to 6 feet and you want to dig to 20 feet, I'm not going to say no, do not do it. But evaluate your cost based on 6 feet, submit that to us so we can come up with the minimum value. So I would like to hear from the environmental engineer why he believes that digging down the entire site to 18 feet is the only viable solution. Is it possible that we reduce the excavation depth? Is it possible that we could look into other solutions such as containment? Sometimes if you have a contaminated area and you want to keep the contamination just within this area, you could just put like a barrier around the site, and you could do some chemical treatment, in-place chemical treatment, and just cap this site, so you save too much on digging the contaminated material out and put it in drums and disposing this. The cost for these things are like scary numbers, so we would like to hear from the environmental engineer if one of these approaches could be adapted, and if he believes it cannot, why?
Right, okay, and we're reaching out to OER with the same kinds of questions.
Yes, on the, one thing on the coast side, yes, the OER has like a, based on our discussion with them, they have a cost schedule, but the way the OER has the cost, for excavation, they have it per cubic yard. For sheet piling, it's per square foot. But if the applicant is coming up with, okay, for the shoring and sheeting, lump sum price, 400,000. How, where, why? If you give this to the UR, they are not gonna be able to give us any feedback because it's lump sum price. So that's good you mentioned this. For all lump sum items, we need explanation and breakdown for the lump sum item. What does it include, and what is the basis for the cost that is submitted? For example, the remedial investigation drilling, soil borings, monitoring wells, the cost for this is 125,000, and it's lump sum price. So far, I can see 7 borings and 4 monitoring wells. Is the cost 125,000 is just for these 7 borings and 4 monitoring wells? I doubt that. But I need to hear back from the applicant, and it's not the first page of the remediation cost estimation, it's all lump sum prices. So we want to get explanations for these lump sum items. What do they include?
Okay.
For the sheet piling, I would like to get the drawings for the sheet piling, the outlines, the sections, if they do have design. If they do not, give me sketches, give me sections for the sheet pilings, and we'll take a look at the cost.
Good.
I had a question with regards to.
I'm sorry, are you finished?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
more-
done,
no,
yes.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
are finished, okay.
This had come about with regards to containing the contaminant. This had come about, this came up on one of the projects in Staten Island. And at that time, the applicant had said, if you contain it, then there has to be regular monitoring.
Yes.
And is that permitted for residential use, sites used for residential? Or is that something that is accepted for non-residential usage?
So we don't know the answer because that's an OER call, but in our meeting with OER, they said that the tracks seem to be available pretty much for all different kinds of sites. So, and that sometimes it depends on the level of contamination, because these monitoring wells are waiting also for the vapor to eventually be expelled, right? And they can direct how the vapor is directed. They can, I guess there's something that filters the release of the vapors and so on. And so it is possible that track 2 or 3 or something would be available for residential, but I think, didn't they say that, this is not a track 1 cleanup, right? I forget what they said on this, what the track level is. Anyway, I don't remember if they mentioned the track number, but I don't think it's a track 1 cleanup.
Sometimes you could, it's not just containment, sometimes you could first contain to stop the spread to adjacent sites, which I believe it did happen already. The material over there, the subsurface material is mainly sandy, mixed with gravel, so if they have these contaminants for a couple of years, I believe now they are spread to adjacent areas, most likely. But
Yes.
even if you have a situation like this and you want to stop, not prevent, you want to stop the spread of contaminants, the transport of contaminants, you could contain, and after the containment, you could chemical treat the contaminated material in place. So you don't have to dig down to extract it. You could just put some pipes and inject some chemicals to treat the contaminated groundwater. This is possible. I've seen it at some sites, but I'm not sure if it's possible on this specific site or not.
From the note I have, it's they're proposing track 4.
Yes, I believe this is the
Yeah.
track they
Oh,
are.
so
That's
track
what
4,
they're
so
doing,
that's
yeah.
the least extreme of all of them. So track 1 was the one we saw in Amsterdam where they were removing soil down to like 40 feet.
Right.
And also, they had schist. They were actually removing schist because their borings indicated even the schist had oil in it. And so they were doing this really extreme amount of cleanup, and it wasn't for residential use. It was a hotel and an office building, right? So, and they persuaded us that track 1 was necessary because of the level of contamination and
The
of
kind
the
of
cost of the future monitoring. But it doesn't always work out that way, apparently. Sometimes track 1 is cheaper, and sometimes it's much more expensive than all of the other choices. And so this is the
least,
lowest,
right.
right? And the other track 4 we saw was just entirely an encapsulation where they didn't dig at all. They just put down a layer on top of a layer of concrete and things like gravel, vapor barrier, another layer of gravel, concrete, and then they put sheeting down around the contaminated
Yep.
area, and that was considered enough of a containment under track 4.
No, for this case, they are talking about digging. I believe the cellar is about 10 feet below grade, and they are proposing digging down 18 feet. So they are like over excavating 8 feet below the cellar, and they want to dig this material out and then put structural fill instead, and then put the cellar in. If digging down this extra 8 feet is not needed, and containment and in-place treatment / capping could be done, this is significant savings for the project, so I believe they should look into that. And if they believe that it's not doable, they should tell us why. And of course, they should, in the construction cost estimate, they should follow whatever we posted on the website with regard to the requirements for a construction cost estimate. Still, all the quantities are just like quantities. We don't have any explanations for the numbers on the quantity side. So we're not able to follow how they came up with these numbers, like on page.
Okay.
Yeah, for example, on page 4, structural steel, I have 70 tons. The price is about 3,200. I'm okay with the price per ton, but it's 70 ton. How they come up with this number, 70 ton? I don't know, so I need to get some explanation for that. Same thing for the other items. The foundation is just, there are no prices for that, there are no quantities for the foundation. I don't know what that mean. So I believe that construction cost estimate is still very premature. They need to like take a look at it and update it and submit it to us.
Immature or premature, or, no, it's
Immature, yeah.
immature, yeah. So, and they should, to make it easier, go onto our website where we have the administrative notice for the costing of these projects and use that, or the project manager can give it to them, but it's on the
It's
website.
mainly clarification about the quantities.
Yeah, right. Okay. Any other, you had more comments? Does anybody else have comments on this? Okay.
Move on. Item number 21, 23415BZ, 1223 67th Street, Brooklyn.
So they submitted, I guess that was Friday, an option 1 and an option 2 of drawings, both of which are a complete set of drawings. both of which show the front balcony open at the front and sides, and both of which provide a height and setback envelope, the sort of wire diagram into which both options fit. So I just want to be clear again, this is a 73622 application to waive floor area only. So the BSA will not opine on the building's compliance with front yards, permitted obstructions in yards, which is the balcony issue, front or side yard setbacks, perimeter wall height, or the maximum building heights or minimum setbacks pursuant to 23-631B. We had asked that the applicant put on the drawings a note to that effect, but they didn't do it. I know the architect, I think, may still be out of the country.
I think he's back.
He's back, so if he's able to put that note on, that would be much clearer and better for us. If not, we can include it as a clear condition in the resolution, but it's always better if it's on the
All right,
drawing.
I'll get the language from you, and then we'll email it to.
Yes.
to-
And then I'm not aware of the board ever accepting an option A or an option B, so they need to pick which one. I don't personally have a preference. There's different reasons for each. You know,
Yeah, I need to know what's.
yeah, there's different reasons why you might go with either from an aesthetic perspective, but it shows that the existing roof line doesn't fit within the envelope, and so, okay, so that's it.
Okay.
Any other comments on that?
Item number 22, 2016-4208BZ, 142 West 19th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. The plans were revised as requested to eliminate the sliver law waiver, and the waiver is now only for rear yard and lot coverage, and maybe start with Commissioner Sheta and then Commissioner Otley Brown on this one.
I did see some revisions to the excavation support and underpinning drawings. The only concern for me right now is that during the last hearing, we did ask them to change the numbers for the rock excavation and the line drilling. If you recall, during the last hearing, it was an argument about the underpinning, and associated with that, when they took the underpinning down and they provided some details on it, it was an increase in two items, the rock excavation and the line drilling. So the conclusion during the last hearing was they didn't justify that increase, and we did ask them to go back with the numbers for these two items to the prior to March, the numbers before the March submission. I believe that last submission was February 6th. And in this submission, I can still see that they are using the higher numbers. So I'm not sure why they are insisting on leaving these numbers as is. However, I did change the numbers and give them to Commissioner Otley Brown to take a look at the impact of these higher numbers in the financial, and she can tell us what was the impact.
Well, I've actually evaluated both scenarios using the reduced construction costs suggested by Commissioner Sheta, and I found that it does not significantly impact the E-finding.
Okay, all right, so we're good then, okay.
But I would say that it's not good practice that we ask the applicant to, or we agree with the applicant. The conclusion last hearing was, please go ahead and change these numbers back to the old numbers, and they weren't able to justify the increase, and I believe it was like a good attitude from them to just go back to the numbers they previously submitted, but they didn't do it. So I would say the perception of this from my side was in like a disrespect, so that wasn't good.
Okay. All right, but if it's not in the end affecting the viability of
Understood,
the
yes.
as of right or the proposed, then,
Yeah, I understand,
Okay.
yes.
okay. All right,
Move on.
yeah.
Item number 23, 2016-4276BZ, 333 Johnson Avenue, the Brooklyn.
Okay. So we haven't looked at this application since September. It was adjourned in January, and, okay. There's a remedial action work plan that was submitted on April 30th, so DEP is still in review. DEP also asked for a CHASP that I didn't see. Oh, you have? Did get it, received, okay. Received. Oh, okay, received. And I just don't know, I didn't take a look at it, but I wanted to make sure that the revised submission indicates that there's in-ground disturbance for the columns, because the last time it didn't show in-ground disturbance, so we need to make sure that that's in there. At the last hearing, we asked for a number of issues to be addressed, and I didn't find any of those. We asked for a BSA zoning calculation chart, which was submitted to us blank. And we asked for verification that the ramp is wide enough for two-way vehicular flow. The plan shows a ramp at 19 feet wide, holding reservoir spaces, so I don't understand how with reservoir spaces that are like awaiting parking, you have two-way flow. The plan was going to be revised to move the attendant booth into the garage and to show a pedestrian path to the elevator. The attendant booth is still shown at the entrance to the building, and I didn't find anything about a pedestrian path. And the cover letter, which just says, attached, please find plans, and doesn't help because it doesn't go through what the board requested and how the submission is responsive. So that actually is one of our requirements in our administrative notice. It arguably should have been, but I'm not, so what we do when we're checking whether or not something should be adjourned is we just check whether the thing is in there, the plans are in there. So, but we don't review the plans to see, did they not move the attendant booth? So to ask for the project manager to like review the entire submission the minute they're made, that's extreme. But there is another one where it should have been administratively adjourned because it was clearly not in there, right? But I would say that this was not responsive, and that they really do need to use the cover letters to help us show us that they are responding to all of the questions that were posed or issues. Okay. Anybody else on this?
No, those were exactly my comments when I was reviewing the plans.
Right, so a lot of those comments that I just read were comments that you had made at the last hearing. So, right. Okay.
Move on. Item number 24, 2016-4295BZ, 1074 East 24th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay.
Receive revised plans.
Yeah, sorry. So at the last hearing, we required that the architect attend this one, and the architect really does need to attend, because unless there were revised plans since the last ones I looked at. So the demo drawings, which I think are really a great help, they clarify where, in terms of the methodology of showing a demo drawing, they clarify where existing material is that will be retained at the exterior. In this case, the floor plans need to match those identically in terms of retention of existing exterior wall, because I'm still seeing the proposed plans showing more, sort of claiming more exterior wall to be maintained than is actually. They need to match. We still need to speak to the architect about the attic space, which we've talked about from the very beginning. That's very strange, uninhabitable, unusable attic with all of these things in it that make the building taller. And we talked about before, the portion of the attic that is within the 30-foot rear yard could be pulled back because it's not occupiable space. I think we've talked about this at like every hearing, and not bringing the architect slows this down. So I don't know how to sort of beg the applicant's representative, but you have to come with the architect.
All right, I'm sending her an email.
Slows the project down. the review down. And then I never actually found support in the submissions for not setting back further at the second floor. The house on one side has a 28-foot rear yard, and on the other side, it was approved at 20 feet going all the way up. And we talked about sort of a compromise, like a 25-foot setback at the second floor. And I never saw any kind of justification for why that couldn't happen. And those are my comments. Other?
With regards to the setback in the rear, one of the ways maybe we can achieve a little bit more of the height in the rear is, as I was noticing at the, looking at the south elevation, the angle of the roof in the front is much more than the angle of the roof in the rear. And if that angle of the roof can match, the rear angle roof can match the front angle roof, I think it can set the
Yeah.
building further back and just makes the building much more uniform on both ends.
Right.
And that would be one way of achieving.
Right. And then, the other thing that they did was they created this funny little deck on the roof. It doesn't seem to have any use because it's so low ceiling, and it's just a little portion. So another option is to create a full deck, which, I don't really understand the purpose of that little deck because there's barely standing height underneath it, next to it, right? There's barely anything. You've got the double height cathedral ceiling. No, right? So there's hardly, so those are like little storage areas that go out to this very strange, the whole ceiling configuration is strange. And so that's why I just don't, I don't want to try to explain it because I don't understand it. If you look at the section.
Entrance is 6'11"
Right.
to the patio. I didn't even know you could have an exit that is less than 7
No.
feet high.
6'11"? 7'11". 6'11".
6'11".
Oh, yeah, because the roof is sloping, so you
Right.
can't get a door in.
Yeah.
No, you can have a 7-foot, you can have a 7-foot door.
Right.
Not 6'11". I
Right.
don't know why they're doing that, but anyway. Okay, so if we could have a discussion with the architect, this would have sped up this process like 3 hearings ago. This insistence on not bringing the architect is really doing a disservice to the property owner, frankly. And I would say that if the architect doesn't come, we just adjourn the hearing, because it's really a waste of time to have this conversation. Okay. All right.
Item number 25, 2017-187BZ, 3660 East Tremont Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay. The applicant submitted the community board meeting minutes and a letter of support that's completely unrelated to the normal community board resolution, which states that the neighbors within 500 feet are noticed, and then we have other information from the applicant showing the iterative process where their initial submission to the community board was a no-go, and then they went back and they redesigned and so on. So there's been a lot of community outreach, which was my concern. They also, thankfully, added landscaping along the edge that's shared with the neighbor, with the residential property owner. So it's got 8-foot-high dense shrubs against a 6-foot-high PVC fence. I'm just wondering why the fence isn't an acoustical fence, because they show the sound diagram shows that with the sound limiter from the menu board, you're reaching 30 dBA at that property line. So a PVC fence doesn't have any acoustical value, but if you had an acoustical fence, you would maybe bring that down to nothing. And my concern is people sitting in their lawn chairs that shouldn't hear that a double cheese, whatever it is you call those things, double mac with cheese. Right, so even at 30 dBA, if you're sitting quietly hoping to listen to the birds and instead you're ordering a shake, that's annoying, so it seems like that should just be changed to one of those acoustical fences. And then the neighbor could put up their own more decorative fence to hide the acoustical fence if it's not attractive. They're not that bad looking, but that's the neighbor's call. And then it could be also that the property owner offers to conceal it with something that's more attractive on that side, the developer, this side.
There's a wide range of acoustical fences out there,
Yeah, there are.
and not all of them are an eyesore.
No. Right, so I think they should be working with the neighbor. I mean, really, they should be doing the right thing for the neighbor, because that's who they're really affecting. Then, I just had two questions. They provided these really clear signage drawings. They have something that's labeled on the signage drawings as a springboard canopy, and another one that's described as the Welcome Point Gateway. That's on drawing 11. The site plan, though, doesn't describe those things with those names on the site plan. One is described as the clearance bar on drawing 2, which I'm assuming that's the Welcome Point Gateway, but I have no idea where the springboard canopy is. The reason I care about these is because they're very tall and would be visible from by a neighbor. So the welcome, the clearance bar is not visible from the neighbor because it's back of the house. It's away from the rear of the house line. But the other thing, I just don't know where that is. So I just can't find it on drawings. So we'll let them, you don't have to find it, but we'll let them show.
I'd seen it, so
Anybody else on that? No?
May I go on? Item number 26, 2017-213BZ, 1808 Coney Island Avenue, Brooklyn.
Right, this was administratively adjourned for incomplete submission.
Item number 27, 2017-214BZ, 1459 East 24th Street, Brooklyn.
Also administratively adjourned.
Item number 28, 2017-217BZ, 4855 Highland Boulevard, Staten Island.
We had many questions about this application before, but I don't see a cover letter responding to them specifically, which makes it really difficult to figure out what's going on. The information about open space, this is the one that I mean that was probably to be administratively adjourned, should have been. Information about open space was supposed to have been submitted, quote, under separate cover, but never was. We don't do separate covers anymore. Everyone should be looking at the cover letter. And when it says, we'll submit the thing that was required by the board under separate cover, administratively adjourned, because unless it comes that afternoon, it's late. So, and the open space is what this application is all about. Its principal finding is to meet the open space criteria, right? So my first reaction is we should just adjourn this because it's kind of a waste of time, but I'll just go through. There were also a lot of other questions that weren't responded to, which you wouldn't have found out until you started to read through the materials, right, which we found out. So plans were revised, but it isn't clear to what they are responding since there's no cover letter. Questions from the last hearing, we needed a revised zoning sheet. We wanted to know what the setback requirements were when the building was built in the 90s. We wanted to know what the parking requirements for the use in the 90s were and whether the existing building complies with that. The statement of facts states that the DOB allowed, and this is the old statement of facts and the current statement of facts, states that DOB allowed, quote, as-built setbacks that don't comply with the 20-foot requirement, which I find quite odd. They also are looking for an as-built setback determination on the 8.10-foot side yard, which we didn't receive. We said we needed clearer as-built plans, and wanted to know if in 1990 the cellar space was included in the parking calculations. Then we were questioning the need for so many exam rooms, and them saying that there are only going to be 10 people, 10 patients at a time, but how does that work when you have so many exam rooms? And we needed more information to justify the need for the scale of the enlargement. We didn't get any of this. We also asked about how the proposed scale and massing of the building meets the findings relating harmoniously to the surrounding buildings. There's talk in the statement of facts about that, but then there's no visuals, so there isn't really any visual support for that argument. And then they did provide information about how much of the open space is a parking lot, and it does apparently comply with the maximum permitted under 2564, I guess. We asked, why isn't there parking being provided in the cellar? We asked them to show the level of grade on the sections. We asked them to show that the parking area complies with section 37-90. Nothing was provided. They did add a lot of landscaping to the parking, maybe in an effort to show that it's complying, but they don't tell us, so we don't know. And then, let's see, what else? We talked about the massing that should be closer to Highland and away from the residential. They didn't change anything about the massing, so they didn't explain how they are accomplishing the reduction in the massing. And, yeah, I think that was general. But those were comments from the last hearing, and I didn't see them answered.
So is this going to be adjourned?
I think-
And just allowing for testimony of the neighbors?
I think it should be, because it seems like kind of a waste of time to talk about everything all over again.
My only concern is second.
Yeah, we'll have testimony from neighbors, so, okay.
So what are we doing?
So what we should do is adjourn this. There's no point in hearing from the applicant because it was an incomplete submission
Because
that's
the
never
applicant is in the
been.
room, so I just want to
Right.
make sure.
Right, yes. So, but we're going to have to, assuming there are members of the public, we'll have to hear from members of the public. And then there'll be another hearing where I hope all the questions that were in the last, both review session, this review session, and discussed at the hearing are discussed clearly, directly, where there's a cover letter that says the board was concerned about X. This is how we responded to that question. The board was concerned about Y. This is how we responded to the question.
Okay, so we're only going to allow testimony from neighbors if they come.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Zoning calendar, new cases, item number 1, 19015 BZ, 5157 Carmine Street, Manhattan.
Okay. We have proof of service of initial filing, but I didn't find proof of notice of hearing anywhere. I looked and I looked and I looked. Doesn't mean it's not there, but I couldn't find it.
All right, I'll check.
Community Board 2 recommends conditional approval, which I'll read. Conditioned on BSA confirming that 5.22 is the minimum FAR needed to produce a reasonable return on investment. That's because the Community Board doesn't have the facilities to do financial analyses, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
The terms, on condition that the terms proposed in the January 13, 2016 letter and the January 19 and 20, 2016 emails from the applicant, I guess, are memorialized in the BSA's decision. That is, the applicant will not rent any of the ground floor retail commercial space to any bars, cabarets, or clubs, not have any retail commercial spaces smaller than 1,000 square feet, have no less than 3 different retail spaces in the commercial space, only one of which will be a full-service restaurant, which will not exceed 2,100 square feet. I believe the applicant actually wrote a letter saying agreed. Also, to preserve neighborhood architectural context, the windows are switched from tilt and turn to double hung. The corner windows on the upper floors in the style of Frank Lloyd Wright are redesigned to resemble the other corner window treatments in the neighborhood. The windows above the residential entrance are resized to the proportions of the other windows on the upper floors of the building, and the ratio of glass to brick is decreased to more resemble the surrounding buildings. This, I think, stems from the fact that Community Board 2 is used to having a lot of buildings in the historic district. This one isn't. So a lot of these comments sound like they're landmarks committee speaking. And then finally, the design of the facade on Bedford Street is altered to reflect the smaller scale of the narrower street. Don't know how the applicant is intending to respond to those, or if. In response to Community Board 2's comments, there is a letter from the applicant committing to everything except changing the facade, so not rent any of the ground floor to bars, cabarets, or clubs, the minimum size for retail uses, and so on. We have 2 letters of opposition and 2 in favor. With respect to the A finding, the applicant cannot make an argument that the buildings on the site are obsolete if the intention is to tear them down. Now you have to look at this as a vacant lot. To say, in terms of the hardship, you'd have to look at it as a vacant lot, but then that brings up other issues. To say that the systems within the buildings have reached the end of their useful life, I find quite strange, because this is the village and we renovate townhouses regularly and turn them into these high-end wonderfulnesses. So I didn't actually understand that. That's called maintaining your building. The notice of comments asked that the applicant look at including its property at 39 Bedford, Lot 34, as part of the development site, to see if that would obviate the need for the waivers. Instead, the statement of facts responds that it would be impractical to include it and Lot 34, to include Lot 34 and Lot 32 because of the required relocation of 42 tenants, but that wasn't, I think, the question asked. The question was, what if you just included Lot 34, which is a 5-story tenement building, and then you have a perfectly rectangular site? With respect to the other claimed hardships, it seems as if the only issue is the diagonal split lot condition and the dog leg. And so, I'll, before I get on to what therefore the scope of the waivers might be, let's continue with the A discussion. So any other comments on the
With
A?
regards to A, I would like the applicant to provide a little bit more clarification as to why the abutting 2 lots cannot be part of the zoning lot. I think what I was...
It is part of the zoning lot. It's the development site is the question. They describe it as one zoning lot.
No.
The tax lots 32, 34, and 35 have always traveled together.
Together.
Since prior to 1961.
All right.
I misunderstood that.
And they actually describe it as
They
one
actually
zoning
say
lot.
that in their own statement of facts and findings for
I understand.
zoning lot history. They talk about all 3 lots traveling together. And even if they didn't talk about it as being one zoning lot, when we look at substandard lot uniqueness cases, we always ask the applicant to distinguish themselves from other lots that could be developed in tandem with lots that are co-owned by the same person. And so in this case, they have to look at themselves as the entirety of their co-owned lots, which are 32, 34, and 35, which incidentally are a perfect rectangle. And so if they look at it within that lens, everything changes for their uniqueness finding. So at that point, there's no dogleg situation. As far as the diagonal zoning district boundary cutting through the lot and then cutting off the commercial from street access, which is what they discussed with the dogleg, now, even though you have that diagonal zoning district boundary, you still would have commercial frontage on Bedford if you were considering redeveloping. So that, to me, goes out the door. In terms of the argument about the buildings being 85 years old and functionally obsolete with no elevator and non-fireproof, well, the lot that's directly west of it, that's part of their zoning lot, has I think a 4 or 5-story walk-up, which is the same age, the same amount of obsolescence in terms of functionality. It has no elevator, it's a walk-up, it's a non-fireproof. So you kind of, even within your own zoning lot, can't distinguish between those 3 lots that front on Carmine and the ones that front on Bedford that are part of the zoning lot, let alone the rest of the neighborhood, which is full of walk-up apartment buildings that are turn-of-the-century apartment buildings that are non-fireproof. So I think that this case has to be actually reanalyzed and relooked at through that new lens of those 3 lots acting together.
Just to go back, in terms of those 3 lots being looked at as one, I agree that they should be. But with regards to the zoning district, the way it is mapped, while the zoning district would allow commercial use on that frontage of Bedford, there aren't any commercial use along that frontage. And those 2 buildings have existing residential buildings that are pretty raised above from the street level. So converting that into commercial, and therefore to say that this building, the subject lot, portion of the subject lot within the zoning lot should be, I think that's a stronger argument I would like to hear from them.
Sorry, I didn't understand
No,
that.
because
Can you
they have to discuss it as if it is that rectangle. That's all of
I
those 3
understand.
co-owned lots. So yes, I agree with you, it may be difficult
Right.
for them to put commercial, but they can't use the argument that they currently have that says that the C2-6 is cut off from street frontage. That's their whole argument, is that the C2-6 is in the back by the dog leg and has no street access, so you can't put commercial because you can't get to it. That goes out the window.
Right.
Right, lot
That's-
34 is their access to the commercial, even if
Right.
you don't combine with 32.
Exactly.
Right.
So that was my whole argument. You have to re-examine it, and you have to discuss all 3 lots and what are the hardships for those lots.
Right, and, yeah, so, and I think by saying that you can't include all of the buildings on the zoning lot because there's 42 units is sort of a red herring, because what makes this a perfect rectangle is simply bringing in lot 34, which was a strange subdivision in the first place. It's got a strange history of why that became such a little lot. And when you think about how all of these lots were purchased together, they were probably purchased to be an assemblage at some point, and then the owners never went through with the project. Okay, let me see. So let me continue with the, okay. So the other part of it is, even if we were only looking at the dog leg, right, the only waivers that you could justify, let's just say you found uniqueness on this development site as opposed to the perfect rectangle, right? The only waivers you'd be looking at are the issue of commercial on the ground floor and maybe a courtyard waiver, right? So you certainly wouldn't be looking at the floor area increase. So I don't know how you get to floor area, and I'm not, and, yeah. And so, and I think that what they were doing in terms of justifying the reason for the waiver, I don't disagree. It's a really good-looking building, and from a sort of neighborhood character perspective, it's a better building than the as-of-right building, but it's not character that creates an A finding, not so far unless somebody changes the standards for a variance, right?
Just looking at the footprint of the buildings on the other 2 tax lots, I think those 2 buildings are overbuilt.
On the other 2 tax lots?
Yeah. I'm just eyeballing it. It seems they.
Well, they're only, what are they, they're,
On their
Oh,
individual
you're
tax
talking
lots.
about
If
the
you just look at
tenement.
individual tax lots, they probably are overbuilt.
well, in which case, then the zoning analysis is
Then the zoning
incorrect.
analysis is not correct.
So that's the other thing, is they state to us that this is a single zoning lot, right? If it's a single zoning lot, all the buildings on the lot need to be calculated in the zoning calculations. If it's not a single zoning lot, then they have to explain to us why it isn't, because they've made a statement that it is. And it's true that there are lots of record that have traveled together since the 40s. And so, does that meet the A definition of a zoning lot? Maybe. And so either it's a zoning lot, in which case you have to redo the zoning calculations, or if it's not, then we're just talking about common ownership, which is often enough for us to say, sorry, you could have, you're better off than everybody else. And I do have to say that with this dog leg, you're better off than everybody else anyway, because you have more lot area on which you can base your floor area than the average guy who just has a rectangle. And you get to take advantage of the dog leg for your court, right? As opposed to most rectangular sites on corners have to carve into their site to create a legitimate court in order for you to have windows facing that portion, or you end up with staircases there and nobody's windows face and everybody relies on the streets. So, you know, you could say, like, how is that dog leg hurting you? If anything, it's helping you. Let's see. There's also a BSA special permit available for the waiver of courtyard regulations. And that allows also some height and setback modifications. It depends on 50% of the units being income restricted, so it's actually more than the 421A, but that's something to encourage affordable housing development. They do need to show also, from my perspective, now I'm into the, does anybody else want to talk about the A finding, the uniqueness issue? Okay, so then I'm just going to talk a little tiny bit about the,
Are you on C? Because I just wanted to make my statement on B before you moved on to C.
no, I'm just talking about the medical, I'm on the B.
Oh, you're on,
Yeah.
yeah, because I just wanted to make that major B statement,
Okay,
which is that when you are demolishing obsolete buildings, you can't include them in your site value. And that was done here, and that's a major, major adjustment. That even if the project stays as is, kind of does not even come close to meeting the E finding once you make that adjustment.
Okay.
And so therefore, does not come close to justifying an ask of double the FAR. So now you can.
Okay. Yeah, mine wouldn't affect it that much. Okay, so I had trouble imagining that a 6,900 square foot medical space isn't viable. So that's a large medical space, and medical practices are these group practices now. They're not, you know, one doctor with a nurse. So and if you look at the location, it's actually quite a good location for a medical practice. It's near the subway. It's like all sorts of things like that. So they would need to show that that's not viable. And respect to that, the financial analyses show only 2153 square feet of community facility in the as-of-right, and the plans show 4516 square feet at the ground floor and 2,363 square feet at the cellar. So what happened to all of that? Similarly, in the retail space in the proposed, they're not counting the cellar area at all, doesn't figure into the math. And I don't know why the areas for retail and community facility aren't the same. They're off by some number. Okay. And then other stuff. Why doesn't the as-of-right have a rooftop amenity space to make it more comparable to the proposed? Even if it's not enclosed, it could be rooftop garden. And then also, it seems like, so this application was filed a long time ago and then just kind of hung out, right? So it seems to me that the comps are dated, especially the asking where there's no information on the dates. And then with respect to the rent-restricted units, the existing buildings have a total of 14 units, 5 stabilized, of of which, 5 of which are stabilized, and the balance of which have rents between $2,100 and $3,400. So the project with 20 units, only 6 of which are proposed to be rent restricted, is not really responding to the need for affordable housing. That's what they're touting here, you know. They're saying, oh, look, we're providing affordable housing, but actually they're tearing down affordable housing to provide less affordable housing. So I always have problems with those kind of claims. Further, the rent-regulated units are being proposed, and that's a choice, and that's something for Commissioner Otley Brown, because we can't require them. It's not under HPD governance in this case. They could opt out of the 421A program, and meanwhile, they're using lower rents to qualify in the financials. So I know this is premature because we may not have an A, but and then I had already mentioned, I don't think neighborhood character is an issue. It's a building that works well with the neighborhood. The zoning calculation sheet refers to the incorrect section for height and setback. It should be section 23662. DEP requires a Phase 2 work plan and a HASP. You might not do that for a little while until we see whether you have an A finding, because those are expensive to prepare. And then LPC had comments with respect to archaeological review. So this is actually a type 1 action. It says the site is within the State and National Register of Historic Places, the South Village Historic District, and the demolition of the 3 contributing buildings to those districts are considered a significant adverse impact for architectural resources. So the EAS must address this and LPC must review it. Yeah, exactly. It's, archaeological, but also for the contributing resource of those buildings, right? Which, if they're allowed to be torn down, then they have to do one of those HABs studies. And we know how well that works, so HAB studies would need to be done before we decide. Because we see that HAB studies are required and they're never done. Okay. Continue.
So you picked up on the zoning resolution section. The other comment I had was when I was looking at the plan, the inner code diagram that has been shown in the as of right seems to be less than what is required, 1,200 square feet. So if drawn to 1,200 square feet, there would be greater waiver that would be asked. So applicant should go back and just confirm that. With regards to the height building envelope, I was trying to figure out which building envelope actually was being applied, because even though the text says R7 quality housing envelope, the chart showed different building street wall heights and building heights, so need to just consolidate that between the charts and the statement of facts and the drawings. If using R7, the R7 street wall height is 40 feet to 65 feet, and the maximum building height is 75 feet, and somewhere in the text, I think I saw 60 feet and other heights. So that needs to be corrected. I had a general comment on one of the findings. I think it goes back to the uniqueness of it, which was there was a drawing that was shown that indicated there were several irregular lot, which I think now goes out of the window if we have a uniform rectangular thing. So I think I don't need to. I just started reading it and then I realized.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
then it might
looking at
not
it.
be relevant.
Yeah,
Okay.
might not be relevant.
So I didn't get very far in the financials because I saw that major issue with the site value. And I'm expecting there to be some kind of a major shift in reorganization in the case. But I do agree with you that once it actually is revised, it should be the most recent sales prices and asking prices that could be found.
Okay, I did look at the construction cost estimate, and I'm gonna go over the as of right, and whatever I mention as comments for the as of right should apply to the proposed. So the as of right construction cost for the foundation includes sheathing and shoring, and in the meantime includes underpinning. That's possible. However, I need the drawings that indicates that the site has areas that need to be shored with something like soldier pile or steel sheet piling. or need to be underpinned. So a drawing that should reflect both sheathing and underpinning, of course, with the details of underpinning and sheathing, so we can look at the quantities and see if they make sense. General excavation, in general, all the quantities, I don't have details for them. For example, for the general excavation, I have 2396 cubic yard. I need a breakdown for that. How can we get to this number? It's X times Y times D, so I need to easy follow the numbers in the quantity column. For the pumping, I have one lump sum item at $30,000. I'm not sure if we have groundwater. I don't have the geotechnical report. This is a six-story building for the proposed. I believe we should have a geotech report, or even if they did any borings, they can get us the logs for these borings so we can take a look at them and see if we have any groundwater.
But there's a cellar already in all of these buildings, right? So certainly.
In the proposed building, they have cellar. On the adjacent buildings, I don't know. If they have cellars in the adjacent buildings that match the elevation of the proposed cellar, I believe that shoring / underpinning should be eliminated. If the adjacent cellar match the proposed one, there is no need for underpinning or shoring. And the prices that cost for these items are significant. The shoring is above 300,000. The underpinning is almost 300,000. So that's why we need to get like a more clear existing condition plan indicating that, yes, for this adjacent building, it's ground floor, one cellar, and it's 2-story, and the cellar floor is this elevation. The top of the cellar is this elevation. So we can see whether they need underpinning or not, or excavation support or not. The quantities, we need like details for the quantity survey. I have split footings, I have 125 cubic yard. Again, I don't have drawings for the footings, and I'm not sure where from that 125 was obtained. The price for the concrete for the footing is 1,000 per cubic yard. This is reasonable, I'm okay with that. For the foundation walls, it's 1,100. So we started to see unit price for the reinforced concrete on the order of 1,000 to 1,100 here, which is okay. The underpinning, like I said, we need the details for the underpinning piers. But moving forward, I have the superstructure, and the superstructure is kind of a concrete slab. They call it flat plate because it doesn't have any beams in it. So it's just like a plate, 8-inch thick. And the unit price for that roof is, instead of taking this by cubic yard, they priced it by square foot. I'm okay with that. However, it should be a correlation between the square footage unit price and the cubic yard unit price. They used concrete, like I just said, at 1,100 per cubic yard. So let's say for that 8-inch flat plate, it might be higher. It might be 1,250 or something like that. When I take 8-inch thick by 1 foot by 1 foot and get the cubic yardage for this and use the $75 per square foot they are using right now, I should get something on order of 1,250 or so per cubic yard. But when you take that number, the 57, and factor it in one square foot times 8-inch thick, that gives you like 2/3 a cubic foot divided by 27. By the 57, the unit price for the concrete is way higher than 1,500. It's almost on the order of 2,000 per cubic yard, which means that the 57 number is really high number and it should be taken down. A reasonable number should be between $35 and $45 per square foot. If they believe it's different, please give me feedback. or give me explanation, so I can take that. That's it, and for the rest of the quantities, like I said, we need backup on the quantities to understand how they reach it out, how they reach it out to these numbers.
Good. Okay. Commissioner Shabeta, do you have any other comment?
Nothing much.
No?
Sorry. We did receive the proof of hearing notice.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Somehow wasn't up.
Have.
Somehow it wasn't uploaded, but
Oh,
I'll
okay.
just make sure it gets uploaded.
But you have it, you sure?
Yeah,
Joe
it was
Cantadella.
sent via email, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Next one.
Item number 2, 2016-4273BZ, 669 Second Avenue, Manhattan. This is going to be good.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board 6 recommends denial. This is a variance application, and we're used to seeing this as an appeal, so. The applicant needs to provide backup materials, or if it was already provided, explain to us which one of those things is for the October 29th, 2008 reconsideration. The statement of fact states that the commissioner had all, quote, all the pertinent facts. I'd like to know what specifically was submitted to the commissioner, because we do have some drawings, but I don't know what the commissioner saw. They need to establish clearly that the commissioner based his determination on a full understanding that the sign would be located on an entirely different tax lot at the opposite end of the future development site. With respect to the December 17th, 2003 BSA letter of substantial compliance, the sign is not mentioned in any of the BSA resolutions and was not a material aspect of the grant. The question of a letter of substantial compliance goes to whether the requested modification impacts the scope of the waivers granted. I don't believe BSA was commenting on the legality of the sign's relocation, only that its relocation didn't impact the variance findings. Nonetheless, the sign was not installed anywhere near the location shown in the letter of substantial compliance, but I don't think it's appropriate for DOB to say, you know, BSA had the call on whether the sign was legal. We often get changes in things that really the BSA isn't looking at, you know, and they come back because there's some changes in a partition for a letter of substantial compliance. We don't, in a lot of cases, care how the partitions are laid out. The waiver is for use, for example. Then Department of Building states in their letter that the permit had to have been invalid since the applicant should have come back to BSA to request approval of the sign's relocation. So that's relative to my prior comment. If that's the case, I would need case law from DOB to support that kind of a statement. I note that the sign structure permit was issued on June 20th, 2008 for job number, I'll just read the last 3 digits, for job number 912, and on December 11th, 2008 for job number 343, both for lot 28. No sign-related permits were issued for lots 25, 26, or 27. There are no sign-related violations against lot 28. The timeline provided by the applicant incorrectly states that the permit was issued for the sign structure to be installed on lot 26 and 27. That's totally not true. It's issued for lot 28. ACRIS shows the lots are not a single zoning lot, and no DOB applications have been filed that treat these lots as common zoning lots. So I don't know why it's being discussed that way by the applicant. I note that there are 14 open and defaulted ECB sign violations issued in 2017 against tax lot 26, which is 663 Second Avenue, although there is no record of sign permits at this lot. So And it's interesting that none of the violations, well, maybe they do say sign without a permit, but most of them are for an illegal advertising sign. There are also 3 complaints in 2017 with respect to the signs on that lot. There are also 53 open ECB violations on Lot 27 at 665 Second Avenue, issued in 2010 and 2017, most of which are for signs, although there is also no record of sign permits on this lot. There are also 24 complaints in 2010 and 2017 about the sign, the first of which was inspected by DOB on June 7th, 2010. And this, in my mind, accounts for DOB's interest in the sign 2 years after its installation. We hear all the time that DOB is a complaint-driven agency with respect to violations in general, right? So if they didn't receive complaints until June of 2010, they wouldn't have sent out an inspector who subsequently issues violations. So my first question is, and this is really in part a question to us, but also to DOB, can there have been detrimental reliance on a permit where the permit was issued for a different tax lot? That's so confusing to me. That's like, my neighbor gets a permit, and so I build the thing on my lot. I just have a lot of trouble with that concept. There's a confusing response to this, to a related question that was in the notice of comments. It was, so let's see, the response was to a March 22nd notice of comments letter. The very confusing response, which was not elaborated on at all, said something about not being able to file for a sign permit against those other lots. I don't understand that. I'd like both the applicant and DOB to explain how in the world you can't file a sign application on a lot, and so you file on another, and you don't get any kind of a sign-off from anybody saying, oh yeah, we're having computer difficulties or something, so go file this on an unrelated lot?
Just a reminder that's on appeal, so DOB
No.
is not hearing.
No, DOB apparently is listening and will give testimony.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are questions, so, and they
Yeah.
submitted it.
Yeah, they submitted.
I received the letter, but I didn't
Yeah.
know they were being
Yeah.
continually responding. Okay.
Yeah. So, and a lot of this has to do with the validity of the permit initially, which is what we have to get at for detrimental reliance. With respect to neighborhood character, statement of fact states that there had been an advertising sign without controversy at this property for 25 years before it was removed. That may have been true about the original sign location and orientation, but this is a double-faced sign, so is now viewable by persons on 36th Street, which is residential, whereas the original sign was only visible to those traveling south on 2nd Avenue from 37th Street and from 37th Street itself. So I don't understand that argument if we're talking about two sides. And wouldn't, with respect to that, the minimum variance, if it was decided there was detrimental reliance, wouldn't the minimum variance be a one-sided sign? That would put the owner back to where he'd started in 2008, even if it's in a different location. Anyway, others.
I was trying to read the history of this and understand where the mistake, if at all, was made. And what I'm still trying to understand is that there were two sets of plans that were submitted. There was a structural plan that was submitted, and there was the use sign, this for the sign permit. And the structural plan shows the structure located on the site where it's currently there today. Whereas the sign permit application shows the sign structure on lot 28. And that was the sign, if I understand it from the documents, which is not quite clear, was what a DOB commissioner had reviewed and as part of the objection review had okayed that. To me, that there's a big gap in that, and that fact that one was approved, and I think the structural drawing was dated May of 2008, whereas the DOB commissioner signed off in October 2008. So why were those not reconciled? And did the DOB commissioner review the structural drawings and the sign drawings together and determine that otherwise the DOB commissioner was looking at the wrong set of drawings and the structural approval was given for a different set of drawings? So I think it goes to both the applicant and DOB to answer that question from my end.
Well, and it's also, we were given a pile of drawings. We don't know whether that's what Commissioner Santulli saw. We just have a pile of drawings.
Right.
Right?
Right. And also with regards to the BSA drawings, the BSA approval did show a sign, but that was facing, I think from the diagrams, facing Second Avenue, not even 37th Street. And it's still not clear how that ties in with the DOB's issue of the BSA. That connection was not clear to me in the documentation.
Right. And I'm saying, yeah, they relied on it somehow, but I don't think it was appropriate to rely on it. But unless we see maybe there's case law that shows that whatever BSA says about whatever BSA says it about, even if it's unrelated to the scope of the waiver rules.
The BSA resolution for the appeals case seems to have brought out that fact that since there was a BSA variance that was granted where a sign was permitted, the sign that was approved by DOB commissioner should not have been granted because there was a BSA approval for a sign. That's kind of how I read that, and I'm trying to connect the dots.
Right. Yeah. But we don't
But I'm not
We're not supposed to
necessarily.
be considering the appeals resolution, are we?
No, I'm just
No.
reading off
She was
the
talking about the
history of
history.
it as to,
Yes.
and I'm not sure if DOB commissioner at that time was aware there was a variance and if that should have been weighed in at that time, all of that.
Right,
That's why I'm just referring to the appeals.
right, okay. Other comments?
Well, I'm not convinced by the good faith reliance argument for two reasons. I feel in this case there was constructive notice in the form of the original objections, which really vetted this issue as to how could you say you're replacing as per 52-83 when you are at the southern end of the block, you're in a different orientation, and you're freestanding versus wall, and you're two-sided versus one. So those issues were fully vetted by DOB, resulting in the objections. So they can't say they were ignorant of the fact that this was an issue. So that's my first issue. The second one has to do with the requirement that there be repeated assurances by the governing agency that they were proceeding in a lawful way. And to me, there was only one assurance by the governing agency, and that was by Commissioner Santulli, and we're not entirely sure that he had the full amount of facts. So that's one assurance versus several situations of objections. The initial objections, the intent to revoke and reversal of permits by Assistant Commissioner Colgate and Deputy Commissioner Amer's ruling, as well as the clarity of ZR 52-83. So I think that there was not repeated assurances by those who were in government who were monitoring the situation. So that's why I'm not convinced by this argument they're putting forward.
So that brings up an interesting subject. So, because I certainly remember back in the day going to various commissioners who, where they would sometimes give me a waiver on something, and I'd look at them and say, are you sure? Because that's not what it says here in the zoning resolution. And they would be like, oh yeah, don't worry, it's good. And so, you can decide to go with that. You can tell your client, look, it's good, according to them, but I'm just telling you right now that if this comes up later, I'm not going to be able to defend it, and the next person may say that wasn't probably the right way to go, even though they're willing to sign this paper, because it says right here, and yeah, I'm not so sure about that, right? So those are the parts where you can throw the spaghetti and see if it sticks on the wall and then run with it, or say that we're willing to take this risk, right? And then that's the calculated risk, which arguably they took. because it's been running for a long time with some nice profits, and then their risk ran out, sort of. You could argue that. So that's the other part of it. When it says right there in the zoning resolution, and then you arguably get a sign-off, which doesn't represent what it says where it's very clear in the text, then you would be wise to question the validity of that sign-off. So there is that. Other comments?
Nope, I agree with Commissioner Utley Brown on the fact that I don't buy the good faith argument. I believe on one of the comments from the DOB was made clear that one of the objections said new sign must be located at the same location as the old. That's it. And then this objection was removed and they got sign off, so.
Right. And the other part of it, the permit in bold letters, which it almost never does, that's the other question, sort of, I think he doth protest too much, kind of. The permit in very bold letters says the sign's in the same place, when it's
Only
not in the
lower.
same place. Sorry?
It says that, and then it says only lower.
Only lower,
Only
right.
lower. But,
Which is very likely what the commissioner initially was responding to. They're dropping the sign down in place, right? We don't know that he looked at the other location, because we don't know what he saw.
Right,
And
the
then-
structural drawing folder did not go to the Borough Commissioner.
Well, that's, you know.
That's the
I feel
question.
like-
We don't know what went.
I feel I'm going to be echoing what was said, but I think it's really important that we see what the Borough Commissioner
Right.
approved, what he saw, because that's, along with a few other things, is going to be paramount to saying whether or not this person acted on a good faith reliance. And again, I'm seconding what the chair stated, but I want an explanation as to why the applicant's voluntary conduct bringing this application to the Department of Buildings, as opposed to coming back to the Board of Ends and Appeals. I want an explanation as to why they did that. We have jurisdiction, the BSA had jurisdiction on this lot since 2002. So those applications should be coming to the BSA before, as opposed to through to the board. Now, if a party can't say they have good faith reliance if their own conduct is the reason for their hardship. And I believe the chair mentioned that she'd like this flushed out, as far as the case law is concerned on that, and I would too, but I'd like it flushed out by both the applicant and the Department of Buildings if they are willing to testify. I also, and this is secondary, but I do want to hear them flushing out of the findings, in particular the E finding. I don't see how that they're requesting this as a minimum variance. It's very different than the cases that they cited in their statement of facts. But again, for me, the good faith reliance and their own conduct, that's going to play a pivotal role as to whether I believe they can make such a claim or are stopped from such a claim.
Right. Okay. Right,
I,
because, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a different concern. It's a civil engineer concern. I did look at the foundation as it was submitted as part of the structural drawings, and I saw that the foundation for this huge sign, it's almost 15 by 50, the sign size, and it's elevated. So the foundation seems to be like, it's a spread footings, two spread footings, and I didn't see any tie-down anchors like holding this huge sign to the ground. So I would suggest, and I'm not trying here to like step into somebody else's limits, but I would suggest that whoever installed and is operating this sign to take a look at the structural design of the structure that's holding this sign.
Okay,
Of course, based on the New York City Building Code.
right.
And it might be okay, but it's a concern. I did try, honestly, I did try to do it before the weekend, but I didn't
No,
have a
but
chance.
you don't need to look at theirs.
It's a public
Yeah.
safety concern, so I did try to run some numbers, but I couldn't because I didn't have the,
Right.
like, the tools and the handbooks, so it's suggested that he take a look at that.
With respect to all of that, I keep thinking that, so this gets a variance, and then it gets an extension on the site gets an extension, and then gets another extension, and it seems like when the sign was installed, the idea was to just keep it up for a little while, right? Because it was going to be removed soon to allow for construction of a project. So in a certain way, like throwing it up using the minimum kind of minimum requirement structurally, even if it's not, but let's just say conceptually, was, this thing's only going to be up for a couple of years, we're filing for permits now, we're working on the drawings, and so you don't need to assume that this is a permanent structure, and that might be why you're
You mean
seeing
they
what
looked
you're
at it
seeing.
as if it was like a temporary structure?
Yeah,
Not a
exactly.
permanent. I got the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
feeling when I looked
Yeah.
at that, yeah, yep.
Right, okay. Okay. All right.
Item number 3, 2017-287 BZ, 11303, 11311 Springfield Boulevard, Queens.
Yeah, we have a proof of service to officials and notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval. We don't have DOI, or I didn't find it. Okay, we have DOI?
I didn't see it in the file.
Not in the folder. Okay. Okay, and I didn't have any other comments about this, and it's not a legalization. Anybody else? No?
Item number 4, 2017-296 BZ, 817-833 Washington Street, Manhattan.
Okay, this, in fact, is a legalization. We do have proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, but I actually didn't find proof of service, although Community Board issued their recommendation, so it must have been provided. We therefore, because it's a legalization, need therapists' licenses. We need DOI, which I also didn't find, and okay, not in the folder. So, and just a comment because fire department normally looks at these legalizations, this is really a small establishment on the first floor of a 2-story building, so not sure that they want to pursue all this other stuff, fires and sprinklers. The cellar is just storage, so normally they're concerned when there's occupancy. And in this kind of establishment, there's a lot of stuff they need to store, right? So I'm not sure that this would need more, but that's the fire department's call. Oh, sorry, approval.
I just had comment on the drawings. I think there was 3 sets of plans that are there in our folder. One plan shows the existing and the proposed conditions, including the cellar and the proposed. Then there's another set of plan which shows the fire egress, and the third one just shows the proposed with the elevation and signage. We need to consolidate all of that and have all that information in one drawings, because the proposed does not include the cellar floor plan.
Yeah, right, it is pretty confusing. You keep flipping through drawings and learning a little more on each set, but they're not consolidated, yeah. Okay. But not in SharePoint.
Maybe it's in the course of being uploaded now.
Yeah, okay. 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 Maybe it's been uploaded since. but-
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right, that's it.
I'm sorry, Tony, just one thing, the firm map doesn't show the site location, so they need to, like, put the location of the site.
On this last one.
On the firm map.
Yeah, and Washington Street is one you might worry about, whether it's floodplain. Okay.
This concludes
The public review session for May 21st.